As you rest peacefully tonight, somewhere above you in the darkness, birds may be flying thousands of feet overhead, navigating with precision across continents and oceans to reach destinations they've never visited before, following invisible pathways written in Earth's magnetic field, encoded in the patterns of stars and measured by the arc of the sun across the sky. These remarkable navigators possess sensory abilities that humans can barely comprehend, allowing them to find their way across the globe with accuracy that continues to astonish scientists studying the mystery of avian navigation. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you'll discover how birds navigate using multiple overlapping systems: magnetic compasses built into their eyes and brains, celestial navigation by sun and stars, recognition of visual landmarks, detection of infrasound and wind patterns, and perhaps even to smell their way home across hundreds of miles. You'll explore how evolution has equipped birds with biological GPS systems far more sophisticated than the technology humans use, creating one of nature's most impressive demonstrations of sensory integration and spatial awareness. The Arctic tern holds the record for the longest migration of any animal, flying roughly 44,000 miles each year from Arctic breeding grounds to Antarctic feeding areas and back, experiencing 2 summers per year and seeing more daylight than any other creature on Earth. These birds, weighing less than half a pound, navigate across open ocean with no landmarks for thousands of miles, arriving at specific locations they've never visited before with remarkable precision. Bar-tailed godwits make one of the most impressive non-stop flights in the animal kingdom, traveling 7,000 miles from Alaska to New Zealand across the Pacific Ocean without resting, eating, or drinking for 8 to 9 days of continuous flight. How do they know which direction to fly across featureless ocean? How do they maintain their bearing through storms, clouds, and day-night cycles? The answer lies in multiple, sophisticated navigation systems working together to guide their journey. Even young birds making their first migration often travel alone, without experienced adults to guide them. Yet they arrive at appropriate wintering grounds they've never seen, demonstrating that navigation abilities are partly innate, written into their genetic code through millions of years of evolution. The ability to orient correctly on their first journey, without prior experience or guidance, suggests that birds are born with internal maps and compasses that require only calibration, not learning, to function. Not all birds migrate long distances, but even resident species demonstrate remarkable navigation abilities. Homing pigeons can return to their loft from release points hundreds of miles away, even from locations they've never visited. Clark's nutcrackers can remember and relocate thousands of seed caches scattered across mountainous terrain after months of snowfall. These abilities suggest that avian navigation is not just about migration, but represents a fundamental capacity that helps birds survive in their environments. The study of bird navigation has revealed that these animals don't rely on a single sense, but integrate multiple sources of information, what scientists call redundancy in navigation systems. If cloud cover blocks the sun, birds can navigate by magnetic field. If magnetic anomalies create confusion, they can use landmarks or stars. This multi-system approach ensures reliable navigation, even when individual cues are unavailable or ambiguous. Understanding how birds navigate has practical implications beyond ornithology. Engineers study bird navigation to improve autonomous vehicle systems, robotics, and navigation algorithms. The biological solutions that evolution has developed over millions of years often outperform human engineering. inspiring biomimetic approaches to solving technological challenges. As you prepare to explore avian navigation tonight, rest in wonder at the fact that birds experience the world through senses humans don't possess, perceiving magnetic fields as visible patterns, tracking the sun's position even through clouds, reading star patterns like maps, and integrating all this information into precise navigation across hemispheres. The sky above you is filled with these natural navigators, following invisible pathways that connect the globe in migration routes that have existed longer than human civilization. The magnetic sense, seeing Earth's invisible field. Descend now into the remarkable discovery that birds can sense Earth's magnetic field, not just as a vague directional cue, but as a visible pattern they may actually see superimposed on their vision, creating a built-in compass more sophisticated than any human-made navigation instrument, revealing a sensory dimension completely foreign to human experience. Earth's magnetic field extends from the planet's core into space, creating invisible lines of force that arc from the south magnetic pole to the north magnetic pole. This field, generated by electric currents in Earth's molten outer core, has protected life on our planet for billions of years by deflecting harmful solar radiation. Birds have evolved to use this protective field as a navigation tool, detecting its direction and intensity with remarkable precision. The discovery that birds can sense magnetic fields came from experiments with European robins in the 1960s. Scientists placed birds in circular cages during migration season and observed that they consistently oriented themselves toward their normal migration direction, north in spring, south in fall. When researchers placed the birds inside Helmholtz coils that created artificial magnetic fields, the birds changed their orientation to match the artificial field rather than Earth's natural field, proving they were using magnetism for navigation. But how do birds detect magnetic fields? Scientists have discovered that birds possess two separate magnetic sensing systems, each operating on different physical principles and providing different types of information. This redundancy ensures reliable magnetic navigation under various conditions and at different phases of a journey. The first magnetic sensing system involves specialized proteins called cryptochromes, found in high concentrations in the retina of birds' eyes. These light-sensitive proteins undergo chemical reactions when exposed to blue light, and these reactions are subtly influenced by magnetic fields through quantum mechanical effects involving electron spin states, a phenomenon called the radical pair mechanism that operates at the intersection of chemistry and quantum physics. When blue light enters a bird's eye, it activates cryptochromes that create pairs of molecules with unpaired electrons, radical pairs. These radical pairs exist in different quantum states that are sensitive to magnetic fields. The presence and orientation of Earth's magnetic field influences which quantum states the radical pairs adopt, affecting the downstream chemical reactions. This creates patterns of neural activation in the retina that may appear to birds as visual patterns or color variations superimposed on their normal vision. Scientists believe birds may literally see the magnetic field as a visual overlay, perhaps as patterns of light and shadow, color variations, or geometric shapes that align with magnetic field lines. This magnetic vision would be processed by the brain's visual centers, integrated with normal vision, to create a composite view that includes both the physical landscape and the invisible magnetic landscape. The magnetic information from cryptochromes tells birds about the direction of magnetic field lines. Which way is magnetic north, providing a compass sense. This directional information is crucial for maintaining heading during migration, allowing birds to fly in a consistent direction, even when other cues are unavailable. The second magnetic sensing system involves magnetite, tiny crystals of iron oxide found in the upper beak of many bird species. These microscopic magnetic crystals, arranged in clusters within specialized cells, physically respond to Earth's magnetic field like tiny compass needles, potentially activating nerve endings that send magnetic information to the brain through the trigeminal nerve. The magnetite system provides different information than cryptochromes. It appears to detect the intensity and inclination angle of magnetic field lines, rather than just their direction. Earth's magnetic field varies in strength and angle around the globe. At the magnetic equator, field lines run parallel to the surface, while at the poles, they plunge vertically downward. By detecting these variations, magnetite-based sensors may provide birds with a sense of magnetic position, a magnetic map that tells them not just which direction is north, but where they are on the planet. This combination of compass information from cryptochromes and map information from magnetite creates a complete magnetic navigation system. The compass tells birds which way to fly, while the map tells them where they are, allowing true navigation rather than just orientation. Together, these systems enable birds to set courses for specific destinations and maintain those courses over thousands of miles. The quantum mechanical basis of cryptochrome-based magnetoreception represents one of the few confirmed examples of quantum effects playing a functional role in biology. The fact that bird navigation depends on quantum coherence in radical pairs demonstrates that quantum mechanics is not just relevant for physicists, but operates in living systems, affecting behavior and survival in the natural world. Magnetic navigation works day and night, in clear weather or clouds, over featureless ocean or varied terrain, making it an always available backup system when other navigation cues fail. This reliability has made magnetic sensing a cornerstone of avian navigation, though birds typically use it in combination with other senses rather than relying on it exclusively. Interestingly, artificial electromagnetic fields can disrupt magnetic navigation. Birds exposed to radio frequency fields or strong electromagnetic interference may become disoriented, suggesting that human-generated electromagnetic pollution could affect wild bird navigation. This has raised concerns about how urban electromagnetic environments might impact migratory birds passing through developed areas. As you rest peacefully tonight, imagine what the world looks like to a bird with magnetic vision. The familiar landscape overlaid with shimmering patterns of magnetic information. Field lines arcing across the sky like invisible roads. Magnetic north glowing like a beacon, even through clouds and darkness. This sensory dimension, completely unavailable to human perception, reveals that birds inhabit a richer sensory world than we can directly comprehend, navigating through perceptual spaces that extend beyond our experience, into realms we can understand only through indirect scientific investigation. Celestial navigation, reading the sky. Journey now into the remarkable ability of birds to navigate by sun and stars, using celestial bodies as compass references and even as calendars that inform migration timing, demonstrating that birds are natural astronomers who read the sky with precision that would impress ancient human navigators who used similar techniques to cross oceans. The sun provides birds with a reliable compass during daylight hours, But using solar navigation is more complex than it might initially seem. The sun doesn't remain in a fixed position, but moves across the sky throughout the day, rising in the east, reaching its highest point at noon in the south in the northern hemisphere, and setting in the west. To use the sun for navigation, birds must know not just where the sun is, but also what time of day it is, combining visual observation with an internal biological clock. Birds possess remarkably accurate internal clocks, circadian rhythms that track the passage of time with precision approaching that of human-made timepieces. These biologichical clocks, maintained by cellular oscillations in clock genes expressed throughout the body and synchronized by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, allow birds to compensate for the sun's movement across the sky and extract directional information at any time of day. Experiments have demonstrated this time-compensated sun compass convincingly. When researchers shift birds' circadian rhythms by exposing them to artificial light-dark cycles that are out of sync with natural day-night patterns, the bird's sun compass orientation shifts predictably. If you advance a bird's internal clock by 6 hours, it will orient 90 degrees off from the correct direction, because it interprets the sun's position as if it were 6 hours later in the day than it actually is. The sun compass works even through light cloud cover because birds can detect the sun's position through polarized light patterns in the sky. Sunlight becomes polarized when it scatters off air molecules in the atmosphere, creating patterns of light polarization that form consistent geometric relationships with the sun's position. Birds can detect these polarization patterns, allowing them to determine where the sun is, even when they cannot see the sun directly. This polarized light detection happens in specialized photoreceptors in birds' eyes that are sensitive to the orientation of light waves. The pattern of polarized light forms bands across the sky that rotate around the sun's position, creating what scientists call the celestial E-vector pattern. By analyzing this pattern, birds can locate the sun and use it for navigation, even on overcast days when the sun itself is invisible. Nocturnal migrants, birds that fly primarily at night, use star patterns for celestial navigation. The night sky presents a rotating pattern of stars that circles around the celestial pole, near Polaris, the North Star, in the northern hemisphere. This rotation provides directional information. In the northern hemisphere, the celestial North Pole indicates true north, while individual stars and constellations sweep across the sky in predictable arcs. Young birds learn to use stellar cues by observing the night sky before their first migration. They don't need to memorize specific constellations. Instead, they learn to identify the center of stellar rotation, the point around which all stars appear to circle throughout the night. This center point indicates the direction of the pole, providing a reliable directional reference regardless of which stars are visible. Experiments placing birds in planetariums have confirmed stellar navigation abilities. When researchers show birds accurate star patterns, the birds orient correctly toward their normal migration direction. When the star patterns are rotated, the bird's orientation shifts accordingly, proving they use stellar cues for navigation. Interestingly, birds exposed to planetariums showing only the rotation of stars around the celestial pole, without any specific constellations, can still orient correctly, demonstrating that the geometric center of rotation is more important than memorizing specific star patterns. The combination of solar and stellar navigation provides birds with 24-hour celestial navigation capability. Day-flying migrants use the sun, while nocturnal migrants use stars. Species that migrate at dawn and dusk can use both systems, or transition between them as light conditions change. This flexibility ensures that celestial information is almost always available. Celestial cues also help birds calibrate their magnetic compass. Young birds use celestial information, particularly the rotation of stars around the celestial pole, to determine geographic north, then use this information to set their magnetic compass correctly. This calibration process explains how birds can maintain accurate orientation despite gradual changes in Earth's magnetic field over time and regional magnetic anomalies that might otherwise cause navigation errors. The precision of celestial navigation is remarkable. Some species can detect the sun's position to within a degree or two, and this accuracy is maintained through time compensation that accounts for the sun's 15-degree-per-hour movement across the sky. This level of precision requires integration of visual observation and circadian timing, with accuracy that would be challenging to replicate with human-made instruments. Celestial navigation has limitations, however. Heavy cloud cover can block both sun and stars, making celestial cues unavailable. This is when redundant systems become crucial. Birds can fall back on magnetic sensing or, in familiar areas, visual landmark recognition to maintain their course until celestial cues become available again. The fact that celestial navigation requires learning. Young birds must observe and learn sky patterns before migration, demonstrates that avian navigation combines innate abilities with learned information. Birds are born with the neural architecture to detect and process celestial cues, but they must calibrate these systems through experience, observing how the sky moves and using this information to establish reliable navigational references. As you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine being able to look at the sun and know precisely which direction is north, to watch stars wheel across the sky and extract navigational information from their rotation, to see through clouds using polarized light patterns invisible to human eyes. Birds live in a world where the sky itself is a map, where celestial objects provide constant directional information, where the very rotation of the planet becomes visible through the movement of stars around the celestial pole, creating a natural navigation system that has guided migrations for millions of years before humans ever conceived of compasses, GPS, or any technological navigation aid. Landmarks and memory, the visual map. Discover now how birds create and maintain detailed mental maps of their territories and migration routes, recognizing visual landmarks with extraordinary precision, remembering locations over years and vast distances, and demonstrating that avian spatial memory rivals or exceeds human navigational abilities, especially in species that cache food across large areas. Visual landmark navigation represents perhaps the most intuitive navigation method. Birds simply remember what places look like and use these memories to find their way. Yet, the scale and precision of avian visual memory is anything but simple. Migratory birds can remember specific geographic features along routes thousands of miles long, returning to the same breeding and wintering sites year after year, with accuracy that suggests detailed mental maps. The hippocampus, a brain region crucial for spatial memory in both birds and mammals, is proportionally larger in birds that require extensive spatial memory. Food caching birds like Clark's Nutcrackers, which store tens of thousands of seeds in thousands of different locations and must remember these locations months later, have significantly larger hippocampi than non-caching species. This correlation between hippocampal size and spatial memory demands demonstrates that the brain physically adapts to navigation challenges. Clark's Nutcrackers provide some of the most impressive examples of avian spatial memory. These birds cache pine seeds throughout mountainous terrain during late summer and fall, creating thousands of individual caches. Throughout winter, they retrieve these seeds with remarkable accuracy, even after snow has covered the landscape and visual cues have changed dramatically. They remember not just general areas, but specific locations, often within centimeters of where they buried seeds months earlier. Experiments have shown that Clark's Nutcrackers use multiple types of visual cues to relocate caches. They remember landmarks at multiple scales, large features like rock formations and trees, as well as small features like individual shrubs or distinctive ground patterns. They can also use geometric relationships between landmarks, creating what cognitive scientists call cognitive maps, mental representations that preserve spatial relationships and allow flexible navigation between locations. Homing pigeons develop extensive visual familiarity with terrain around their home loft, creating what researchers call a mosaic map made up of visual snapshots of recognizable locations. On release, pigeons first orient using compass systems, magnetic and solar, then recognize familiar landmarks as they approach their home area and switch to visual piloting, following remembered routes through familiar terrain toward their loft. The range of visual landmark navigation varies with experience and species. Young birds on their first migration may have limited visual memory of routes, relying more heavily on compass systems and innate directional preferences. Experienced adults have accumulated years of visual memory along migration routes, allowing them to recognize landmarks, follow familiar paths, and even take shortcuts through well-known terrain. Migratory birds often follow conspicuous geographic features, coastlines, rivers, mountain ranges, that provide both visual landmarks and wind conditions favorable for flight. The concentration of migrants along these leading lines demonstrates the importance of visual geography in shaping migration routes. These features are not just convenient to follow. They become incorporated into mental maps that guide seasonal movements. Oceanic migrants face the challenge of navigating across featureless expanses with no visual landmarks. For these species, visual memory becomes relevant only near the beginning and end of ocean crossings. During the open water portion of their journey, they rely primarily on compass systems, magnetic, celestial, and possibly wind pattern recognition, to maintain their heading across hundreds or thousands of miles of ocean. Some researchers propose that birds may create olfactory maps in addition to visual ones, using landscape-scale odor patterns to navigate, though this remains more controversial than visual and magnetic navigation. Certain species, particularly seabirds like petrels and shearwaters, that have excellent olfactory abilities, may detect odor gradients across ocean basins and use this information to locate breeding colonies or feeding areas. The integration of landmark memory with compass navigation creates particularly effective navigation strategies. Birds can use compasses to maintain general direction while simultaneously watching for familiar landmarks that indicate they're on course or need to adjust their heading. This combination allows both long-distance orientation across unfamiliar terrain and precise homing to specific locations within familiar areas. Artificial landmarks created by human development may disrupt or enhance bird navigation depending on circumstances. Birds can learn to use human structures like buildings, roads, and towers as navigational landmarks. But these features can also create hazards, particularly tall, lit structures that attract and disorient nocturnal migrants, sometimes leading to fatal collisions. The cognitive complexity required for landmark-based navigation suggests that birds possess sophisticated mental representations of space. They don't just remember isolated images, but encode spatial relationships between landmarks, altitudes, distances, and directions, creating what amounts to mental maps that can be mentally traversed and used to plan routes between locations. Seasonal changes in landscape present challenges for visual navigation. Birds migrating through areas with dramatic seasonal differences, snow cover appearing and disappearing, vegetation changing, water levels fluctuating, must recognize locations despite these changes. This requires remembering not just what places look like, but which features remain stable across seasons, and which features change predictably. As you rest peacefully tonight, marvel at the mental cartography occurring in millions of bird brains worldwide. Detailed maps of breeding territories, migration routes, and wintering grounds maintained with precision that allows return to specific locations after months or years away. These mental maps represent accumulated experience, translated into neural networks that encode spatial relationships, visual memories, and navigational routes, creating biological GPS systems that predate human technology by millions of years and continue to function with reliability that our own technology sometimes struggles to match. Other senses: sound, smell, and wind. Explore now the additional sensory systems birds use for navigation. Infrasound detection that allows hearing of waves, storms, and mountains from hundreds of miles away. Olfactory abilities that may detect landscape-scale odor patterns. Wind sensing that informs both flight efficiency and navigation. And the integration of these senses into a comprehensive perceptual picture that guides avian journeys across the globe. Infrasound, sound below the frequency range of human hearing, typically below 20 Hz, travels for enormous distances through the atmosphere with minimal attenuation. Ocean waves, storms, waterfalls, mountain ranges, and even city noise generate characteristic infrasound signatures that propagate hundreds or even thousands of miles. Birds can detect these low-frequency sounds and may use them for navigation, particularly when other cues are ambiguous or unavailable. Pigeons have demonstrated the ability to detect infrasound frequencies as low as 0.1 Hz, far below human hearing range. This capability would allow them to hear the sound of geographic features from extraordinary distances. The infrasound signature of a mountain range, generated by wind flowing over the peaks, could be detectable from over 600 miles away. Ocean surf creates infrasound that propagates deep inland, potentially allowing birds to orient toward or away from coastlines. The homing abilities of pigeons may partly depend on infrasonic landmarks. Experiments have shown that blocking pigeons' ability to hear infrasound by fitting them with special earplugs or headphones that filter low-frequency sound impairs their homing performance, particularly when released from unfamiliar locations far from home. This suggests infrasound provides orientation cues that help pigeons establish initial bearings before visual landmarks become available. Seabirds, particularly species like petrels and albatrosses that spend most of their lives over open ocean, possess extraordinarily well-developed olfactory systems. These birds can detect specific odor compounds associated with productive feeding areas, particularly dimethyl sulfide, DMS, a volatile compound produced by phytoplankton and particularly abundant in areas with high biological productivity where prey fish concentrate. The ability to detect and navigate toward DMS and other odor cues allows seabirds to locate productive feeding areas across vast expanses of ocean. They can fly upwind toward odor sources from distances of several miles, homing in on areas where prey is likely concentrated. This olfactory navigation supplements other systems, providing crucial information about where to find food in an environment with few stable visual landmarks. Some researchers have proposed that pigeons and other birds may use olfactory navigation more broadly, creating olfactory maps based on wind-carried odors from different directions around their home location. Young pigeons exposed to natural winds and associated odors during development may learn which odors come from which directions, creating an olfactory compass or even an olfactory map. When released at unfamiliar locations, they could sample the local odor environment and compare it to their olfactory map to determine which direction leads home. This olfactory map hypothesis remains controversial, with studies yielding mixed results. Some experiments show that pigeons with impaired sense of smell have reduced homing success, while others find little effect. The importance of olfactory navigation may vary among individuals, populations, and circumstances, suggesting it's one component of a redundant, multi-sense system, rather than a primary navigation mechanism. Wind detection and compensation represent crucial abilities for aerial navigators. Birds can sense wind direction and speed through several mechanisms: visual observation of how the ground moves beneath them during flight, vestibular detection of drift, and direct sensing of airflow over feathers and skin. This wind awareness allows both energy-efficient flight and navigation correction. Migrating birds actively select altitudes with favorable winds, climbing or descending to find tailwinds that assist their journey, or avoid headwinds that would slow progress and waste energy. Nocturnal migrants have been observed climbing to altitudes exceeding 20,000 feet when upper-level winds are favorable, despite the reduced oxygen availability at those heights. The energetic benefit of tailwinds outweighs the physiological cost of high-altitude flight. Wind compensation, adjusting heading to counteract crosswinds and maintain track toward the intended destination, requires sensing wind direction and integrating this information with desired travel direction from compass systems. Birds accomplish this remarkably well, maintaining straight ground tracks even when flying through changing wind conditions that would push them off course without compensation. Some species may use predictable wind patterns as navigational cues. The trade winds, prevailing westerlies, and other large-scale atmospheric circulation patterns create consistent wind conditions in different latitude bands. Birds could use these patterns to help determine latitude, or as confirmation that they're flying in the correct direction for their migration stage. Barometric pressure detection allows birds to sense altitude and weather changes. Migrating birds often respond to dropping barometric pressure, indicating approaching storms. By landing to wait out bad weather, rather than fighting through dangerous conditions. This weather sensing, while not strictly navigational, contributes to successful migration by helping birds choose when to fly and when to rest. Temperature sensing influences navigation indirectly through its effects on flight physiology and behavior. Birds can sense temperature through receptors in their skin and may use temperature gradients to find thermals, rising columns of warm air that provide lift for soaring species. The distribution of thermals influences route selection for raptors, storks, and other birds that rely on soaring flight during migration. The integration of these various sensory systems, magnetic, celestial, visual, infrasonic, olfactory, wind, pressure, and temperature, creates a comprehensive perceptual environment that birds use for navigation. No single sense dominates. Instead, birds weight different cues based on availability, reliability, and learned associations, creating flexible navigation strategies that function across diverse conditions and circumstances. This sensory integration happens unconsciously, processed by neural networks that have evolved to extract navigational information from multiple sources and combine them into coherent, directional decisions. The bird doesn't consciously think about weighing magnetic versus celestial versus visual cues. Its brain automatically performs this integration, producing a unified sense of where to go that emerges from the combined input of many senses. As you drift toward sleep tonight, imagine perceiving the world through this rich sensory tapestry, hearing mountains from hundreds of miles away through infrasound, smelling ocean productivity zones on the wind, feeling the magnetic field patterns overlaid on your vision, tracking the sun's position to maintain heading, all while adjusting for crosswinds and recognizing familiar landmarks below. Birds inhabit a perceptual world far richer than humans can directly experience, using senses we don't possess and integrating information at speeds and scales that reveal the sophistication of avian cognition and the remarkable solutions evolution has produced for the challenge of navigating across a planet. The evolutionary journey, how navigation evolved. Rest now in contemplation of how these remarkable navigation abilities evolved, why some species developed more sophisticated systems than others, how navigation skills can be both innate and learned, and what studying bird navigation reveals about evolution, neurobiology, and the fundamental relationship between organisms and the spatial environments they inhabit. The evolution of bird navigation represents responses to selective pressures created by migration. Birds that could navigate accurately between breeding and wintering grounds survived and reproduced more successfully than birds that became lost or ended up in unsuitable habitats. Over millions of generations, natural selection refined navigational abilities, creating the sophisticated multi-sense systems we observe today. Different species evolved different combinations of navigational abilities based on their ecology. Nocturnal migrants that fly over featureless ocean developed strong magnetic and celestial navigation, but limited visual landmark abilities for much of their journey. Daytime migrants following coastlines or mountain ranges evolved excellent visual memory and landmark recognition. Food caching species developed exceptional spatial memory and cognitive mapping abilities. Each species' navigation toolkit reflects the specific challenges of its lifestyle. The genetic basis of navigation abilities has been partially elucidated through breeding experiments and genetic studies. Hybrid birds produced by crossing populations that migrate in different directions show intermediate orientation preferences, demonstrating that migratory direction has genetic components. The expression of clock genes influences circadian rhythms necessary for time-compensated sun compass navigation. Genes affecting cryptochrome production influence magnetic sensing abilities. Yet navigation is not purely genetic. Birds must calibrate their compasses through experience, learn star patterns, develop familiarity with migration routes and landmarks, and refine their abilities through practice. The interplay between innate predispositions and learned refinements creates navigation systems that are both robust, functioning even in naive young birds, and flexible, improving with experience and adapting to individual circumstances. The evolution of magnetoreception remains particularly fascinating because it requires specialized proteins, cryptochromes, and structures, magnetite, crystals, that must have evolved gradually through intermediate stages. The radical pair mechanism involving quantum effects in cryptochromes likely built upon more ancient light-sensing abilities, co-opting existing photoreceptor machinery for a new purpose: magnetic field detection through light-induced quantum chemistry. Brain structures supporting navigation have evolved dramatically in birds compared to reptilian ancestors. The avian hippocampus, crucial for spatial memory, is proportionally larger and more complex than in most reptiles, reflecting increased demands of aerial navigation and, in some species, food caching across extensive territories. The specialized brain regions that process magnetic information, integrate compass cues, and maintain cognitive maps represent evolutionary innovations that made sophisticated navigation possible. The evolution of migration itself, why birds migrate at all, stems from resource availability fluctuations with season and geography. Tropical regions have relatively stable food supplies year-round, but intense competition. Temperate and polar regions offer abundant food during summer, but become inhospitable in winter. Migration allows birds to exploit seasonal abundance in high-latitude breeding grounds, while escaping winter scarcity by moving to more favorable climates. Ancient migration routes likely followed expanding and contracting habitats as ice ages advanced and retreated. Birds tracked moving habitat boundaries, gradually extending their seasonal movements into regular migrations between distinct summer and winter ranges. The navigation abilities that evolved to support these movements became refined over millions of years, creating the precise long-distance navigation we observe today. Not all birds migrate, and some populations of migratory species have become sedentary when introduced to regions with year-round favorable conditions. This demonstrates that migration and navigation are facultative rather than obligate. They evolve when beneficial and can be lost when no longer advantageous. Some European blackcaps introduced to Bermuda and Hawaii have lost migratory behavior within decades, showing that evolutionary change in migration can occur rapidly. Climate change is currently affecting migration timing, routes, and distances as temperature and food availability patterns shift. Birds that can adjust their migration phenology and routes in response to environmental change are more likely to persist, while species with inflexible, highly specialized navigation systems may struggle to adapt. This ongoing natural experiment reveals selection pressures on navigation systems in real time. Studying bird navigation has profound implications for understanding animal cognition more broadly. The complexity of avian spatial cognition, sensory integration, and decision-making challenges outdated views of birds as simple, instinct-driven creatures. Birds clearly possess sophisticated mental representations of space, time, and environment, process multiple sensory streams simultaneously, make flexible decisions based on integrated information, and learn from experience to refine innate abilities. The development of quantum biology as a research field stems partly from investigations into bird magnetoreception. The discovery that quantum coherence in cryptochrome proteins influences bird navigation demonstrates that quantum effects can be functionally relevant in biological systems, not just curiosities at the molecular level. This has inspired searches for quantum effects in other biological processes, including photosynthesis, enzyme catalysis, and possibly even consciousness. Biomimetic applications of bird navigation principles are emerging in robotics and autonomous vehicles. Engineers study how birds integrate multiple sensors, maintain stable navigation with redundant systems, handle sensor failures gracefully, and make rapid decisions based on imperfect information. The biological solutions evolution has produced often outperform engineered systems in efficiency, robustness, and adaptability. As you drift into peaceful sleep tonight, rest in wonder at the evolutionary processes that created bird navigation. Millions of years of selective pressures, gradually refining sensory systems, neural architectures, and instinctive behaviors into the sophisticated navigation abilities we observe today. Every migrating bird carries in its genes and nervous system the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of ancestors, each contributing incrementally to the perfection of systems that allow navigation across a planet with precision that continues to astonish and inspire those who study these remarkable creatures. Sleep well, knowing that above you, guided by magnetic fields and starlight, informed by infrasound and memory, assisted by favorable winds and visual landmarks, birds are making journeys that would challenge human navigators equipped with technology. Yet they accomplish these feats with elegance and reliability, following invisible pathways across the globe, connecting distant habitats in seasonal cycles as old as the species themselves, demonstrating that evolution creates solutions to navigational challenges that remain unmatched by human engineering. Sweet dreams beneath the migration routes, where birds pass overhead following paths written in magnetic fields and starlight, guided by senses you cannot share, but can appreciate through science, traveling toward destinations they've never seen, but somehow know how to find. Carried by evolution's gift of navigation systems that transform the entire planet into a knowable space, where even small songbirds weighing less than an ounce can journey thousands of miles and arrive precisely where they need to be. As consciousness fades into dreams, birds continue their timeless journeys overhead, sensing magnetic field lines invisible to human eyes, tracking stars wheeling around celestial poles, remembering landmarks from previous journeys, hearing the infrasonic signatures of distant mountains, adjusting for winds that would push them off course, all while their brains unconsciously integrate these multiple sensory streams into the unified imperative to fly in a specific direction toward a specific place, guided by evolution's masterpiece of biological navigation, refined across millions of years into systems that reliably carry them across hemispheres and home again.